This is the Hofstra Radio Alumni Audio Yearbook. Today is August 16th, 2024. Please tell us your name and the years you were at Hofstra Radio.
Bart DeLio. I was at Hofstra from 1982 to 1985.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming and talking to us today and sharing your stories. While you were at the radio station, do you remember any of the names of the programs or departments you worked in?
I worked for the Swedish Smorgasbord. I was producer for that.
Mm-hmm.
The jazz show was my thing. That was what I was most attached to. Most of the kids wanted to do rock and roll, and I wanted to do jazz, so they let me do whatever I wanted.
Nice. Very good. Did you have any titles or positions at the station?
You know, it's funny. They all seemed full, so I didn't take up a title. And Jeff Krause said, "Why aren't you taking up a title?" And I said, "They're all full." He said, "Well, you're going to do this. So you're going to be the assistant studio cleaner upper." Basically, I would just go down once a day and make sure there wasn't anything on the floor, or dust, or equipment laying around. So that was my only official title. I was very shy and a little intimidated by Jeff. I'm sure you never met him, but he was intimidating.
Yeah, I knew Jeff just a little bit, and from day one, I was intimidated. And we talk a lot about that with a lot of people, but quite a good heart behind that tough exterior. When you were on the air, did you have any nicknames or on-air personas?
I didn't. Although the funny thing is, what attracted me to radio was it started out with CB Radio, which was the original chat room, by the way. If you had fun about it. And I've got still friends from there, and still friends that met their wives there also. But I had a number of nicknames on CB Radio. On regular radio was just my name.
Okay. Do you mind sharing any of your CB Radio nicknames?
Let's see. I started out with the Junk Food Junkie. With a lot of junk food, it was appropriate for me. However, I hadn't heard the songs. People just said, "You sound like a junk food junkie." And then the Voice of East Rockaway, and a couple of other silly ones that I don't remember. You know, you could be very anonymous on the CB radio, and I was taller and better looking on the radio, so it's a big plus for me.
Aren't we all? All right. So I guess my first question usually is, what brought you to Hofstra Radio? And then if you could describe sort of what it was like when you first showed up.
When I first showed up, I was a computer science major. And at that time, we were using punch cards. Do you know what a punch card is?
Yes.
Well, it could take up to 6 hours to get one line of code back from the machine. The machine was about the size of the studio, the computer they used. And so it was very frustrating. I couldn't get my work done. So I switched to communications. So when I was there, I took a communications class downstairs in Memorial Hall. It was really a rough place. It wasn't very fixed up the way it is now. So I was taking a class, and they said there's auditions for newscaster for the television station. So I said, all right, I'll go do that. Well, I was the worst candidate for that. I had long hair, I had a mustache, I had big, thick glasses. My hands were shaking like a leaf. And I did the audition. I said, I didn't get it. And I said, my teacher told me, well, there's radio auditions down the block. They can't see you. So I said, I have a class. I can't go. She said, so you're excused from your class. Go do that. So I did an audition quickly and found my voice and continued on.
Wow. So I just want to double back for a second for the computer science stuff. From what I understand of the mainframe computers at the time, they probably would have been a little bit past that time when they were like the giant reel-to-reel sort of looking computers that were the size of a room and perhaps a little bit smaller by then, or was it in that ballpark?
We were in the season of change there. By the time I left, they were all PCs. The teachers didn't know what to do with them. If you had a question, they'd hand you a book and say, "Here, look it up," which is they're all written by engineers, so you can't understand what they're saying anyway. But it was a mainframe. It wasn't the tapes. It was just there was put in a slot for the cards, and the machine would read it. As I said, it's probably as big as the studio was. It was pretty big, the machine.
Right.
And you put it in there and you wait. Sometimes the thing worked right away. Sometimes it broke down. either way, it was very hard to get your work done because things kept breaking all the time.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
by the time I left, they were all gone. All the PCs were gone.
Right. So for some of us, imagining that you're leaving computer science and coming to radio because the equipment worked better.
We were well equipped when I worked professionally.
Yeah.
Our equipment at Hofstra was better than the equipment I worked on professionally.
If we could go back again just a little bit more, I'm assuming you started doing the CB radio stuff as a kid, perhaps as a teenager. What drew you to that?
I was 14 or 15, a shy kid. I could talk and not be seen or picked on or whatever. I had long hair, and I had long hair when nobody else had long hair. All the kids that made fun of me about my long hair, they all grew their hair long later on. Um, so I knew my voice was good because people would tell me, "You sound good." Or you said one of my clients said, "You sound like you're 6'5". I said, "No, no, flip that around." So so when I got to the radio station, I was comfortable with the microphone. They provided classes were all brand new. The studio was new, so we didn't really know what we were doing. We were sort of like, we got a 4-hour workshop here. Here's what we're going to do, and we kind of made it up as we went along.
Hmm. So I'm assuming if you were doing the CB radio stuff, did you have to have a license for that, or the equipment? How did you learn the equipment, and how did you learn how to do that?
I learned just by the seat of my pants. There were licenses. Nobody enforced the license business, but there were licenses.
Hmm.
I used to make fun. Guam had one license, and so I wondered who Guam talked to because you just had the one license.
Hmm.
It was a big thing at the time. It burst off of truckers using CB radio to talk ahead of each other. Um, and then, as I said, it became the chat room. And you'd get on the air and you'd say, maybe on channel 15 or maybe on channel 16. And you'd go and you'd talk for hours, for a
Hmm.
long time. There was some rivalries going on there. People that wanted to start trouble, which is kind of the same as it is now, I think. Uh, You'd call them spammers now, but I can't remember what we call them. But they were annoying.
Yeah.
People would just make noise or jam the radio station, jam the radio signal so that you couldn't talk to anybody else.
Hmm. That's why we can't have nice things, right? Someone's always trying to ruin someone else's good time.
What is that all
Unfortunately.
about?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't get it. Okay, so you join Hofstra Radio, and before we started to record, you were saying that when you first showed up, they were, I think, under the little theater, but then things were moving over to Memorial Hall. Is that right?
Yes, the equipment was all pretty new. I'm not sure how new it was, but just checking online, WRHU started in 1983. So I was there about 82, so it must have been a crossover there.
Hmm.
I did a little production in the old studio, but after that I forgot about it. They closed it off and we didn't go back there again.
Right, right. So did you, because you sort of self-taught yourself the CB radio stuff, was the learning curve easy for you to learn the radio equipment, or did that take some time?
It was much simpler than it is now. I think I caught on to it pretty well. They used to do they teach you how to use the equipment before you touched it,
Hmm.
which was annoying because I was a memory guy. If I did something, I'd remember it. If you told me about it, I would remember it.
Right.
Um, so um, so we had to do procedures, standard operating procedures, to get to know the equipment. And then I don't remember what the first thing I did was. That's interesting. Yeah, because we had two studios. One was an on-air studio, the other was a production studio. And don't remember the first thing I did. That's interesting.
Hmm. Do you remember any of the people who might have been teaching you about the equipment other than Jeff Krause?
Rick Wazowski,
Hmm.
not sure if I'm saying his name right. Um, he was someone we looked up to. He was able to get work doing voiceovers here and there before he graduated. And actually, I traded emails with him. I have the first thing I wrote was a PSA called "The Story of Chocolate," and he did the voiceover for it. And he said that recently I communicated with him that he lost all of his tapes. So I was going to try to send him one. Maybe you can give me his contact information.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Rick's great, and yeah, it'd be nice to reconnect for that info. But what was the public service? Do you have any recollection of the story of chocolate?
Yes, I quiz people on it all the time. Where does chocolate come from? Do you know?
Do you mean geographically, like from
Yeah.
Africa or from
Hmm.
a plant?
Either one.
Okay, well that's my best guess.
You were wrong. It's the Mayans. It was a plant, of course, but it was from the Mayans. It was a drink, and they kept the formula for it secret. Only
Hmm.
the food of the gods. So it's a good party quiz um, for people who are into chocolate.
So you wrote a little script and Rick recorded and produced it.
Yeah, that's the first thing I did, and then I did some voiceovers also, and I kind of discovered my voice. I was doing some recording at that time. I remember we were downstairs, and I read something, and then I read it back in a deeper voice, and someone said, "You sound really good," and so that was kind of finding my voice and finding my way through how I should sound.
Hmm.
I don't remember exactly what I did, but whatever it was, it impressed everybody.
That's great. One of the things I've heard from a lot of people is that although some of us may have been shy or intimidated, there was a spirit of encouragement and experimentation at the radio station. And it sounds like that worked out for you. Is that right?
You would have never, if you knew me at that time, would have never imagined that I'd talk on a microphone in front of anybody.
Hmm.
I was funny all the time, but I didn't stand out. My sister got in trouble, and they told at school, and they told her, she said, "Oh, I'll have my brother pick me up." And they said, "You have a brother?"
Huh.
I was the oldest brother, and I said, "Yep." She said, "Yep." He never gets in trouble, so nobody knows he's around. So some of that broke down some walls for the future, as far as being comfortable to talk in front of people. I never had that problem again.
Wow, that's amazing that the station gave you the experience, and I guess would it be fair to say the confidence to speak your mind and to be yourself?
Yes, I think that's appropriate.
Wow, that's great. So you talked a little bit before about being drawn to the jazz program, whereas a lot of people want you to do the rock program. You said you were interested in jazz. Were you a musician in school, or what drew you to that?
My dad was a big jazz fan, so he was at jazz records around, and actually he'd listen to me on the way home in the afternoon. It ran from I think from 4 to 6, something like that at the time. It was a afternoon show. I don't know if it's still there or not. So my dad had tons of jazz albums, and what I do is I read the album. I put the album on and I read the liner notes on the back of the album.
Yeah.
Um, so people thought I was a genius because I was reading the back of this album, and they said, "How do you know so much?" I'm like, "I just read the back of the album." Um, but from that, I created a series called the Jazz Greats, and I did three units on Louis Armstrong and Charlie Parker.
Wow.
And I still have the tape copied over from not an 8 track,
From the cart or reel to reel?
from a cart. There we go.
Mm.
And so I have copies of it that you can look at. And I was listening to a jazz history. I was on Charlie Parker's birthday, and they had a little 5 minute thing, and it sounded a lot like my 5 minute thing.
Mm.
So I was very impressed with myself. Uh,
Yeah, the education you could get just from reading the liner notes and the album covers was tremendous. When I started doing my jazz show in probably would have been 1991 or so, I had a shift where I had an hour where I was the host, and then there's a pre-recorded program with Ron Bush called Reflections of Jazz, and he would dive into one album or one artist, and then I would have another hour myself. So I would listen to him and get an education, and I would read all the records. And as you were saying that, I flashed back to that because I learned so much because I wasn't a musician and I didn't have the background. But yeah, it was pretty remarkable what you could get listening and taking some time to read. So um,
I love the albums too. You could time your intros and time your outros. You can mix in other music in between at times.
Hmm.
And as I said, they gave me a lot of leeway because most of the kids wanted to do rock and roll, and not that I didn't like it, but I was just more interested in the jazz.
Yeah. What was the name of the jazz program at the time? Do you remember?
I don't know. I did the 6 o'clock spotlight, um, so we play an album at 6 o'clock. And originally, I just let the album run, but there was too much space between songs, so I would pass off the recording from one record to the other.
Okay.
So this way there was no pause in between all the music.
So I think you said you did a particular series on Louis Armstrong and another one on Charlie Parker. Who else were the jazz musicians that caught your attention?
You know, those are the classics. Charlie Parker
Yeah.
was died in the 50s, and Louis Armstrong lived for a long time. Um, in reality, I did three sets for each of them. And looking back, I probably would have done one. But it's a learning curve, so I learned.
Yeah.
um, the information was interesting. There's so much information on the liner notes at the time. As you got to the more modern records, they didn't put as many on there. I loved having the wall of records. I'd get in a little bit early, and I just pull a bunch of albums that sounded interesting to me. It was all done like 5 minutes before we were on air. I pull a bunch of stuff, put it in a basket, and then or a milk carton, and then pick out whatever I was in the mood for. So it was very spontaneous.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And again, forgive me if I'm asking too much minutia, but at that point, was the jazz record library mostly in the studio with you, or was it in a separate room at that point?
No, it was in the studio with us.
Okay, so if
We
you
had
thought,
a we had an archive, but the more modern stuff was not there.
okay, okay. Earlier, we were talking a little bit about Jeff Krause and what an intimidating presence, but also, what a great teacher he was. What do you remember about Jeff?
Let's see. I remember Jeff sitting with his feet up on the desk and smoking a pipe.
Hmm.
Must have been before they changed the law about smoking. I don't remember a huge amount. I think because I was so intimidated, I didn't really. I talked to him once in a while. I do remember him talking about. People said, "Why don't you play all rock and roll on the station, or all of one thing or the other?" And his thought was, "It's an educational station. We're not here to entertain people. We're here to educate our people as to how things should work." So, because of that, he emphasized doing different types of music and different types of shows, and I think it was helpful.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Having the block formats and a chance to try different things was definitely part of the mission of Hofstra Radio at the time. And Jeff was definitely a champion of variety and different kinds of things. And earlier you mentioned doing the show with Sweet Olson. How did you get involved doing that one?
They needed somebody to produce it, so I did it. um, I was there, and then I can't remember the name of the other show. There's another one. I got an award for it, but there was another one on at around the same time. Um, and I remember he worked for different stations. He had a show on different stations besides WRHU, and so he accidentally said the other station at the end of the recording.
Hmm.
So he said, "I got it wrong. You got it wrong twice." So I went back and I cut it off because you could cut it because I had a knife back then. And I played it back, and you never sounded like you never said it again. He said, "That's why I don't trust radio."
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Yeah, if for a pre-recorded program, you could do that. Did you take a university class to learn how to do the editing, cutting the tape, or is that just something you learned at the station?
I think I took a class. So I said the curriculum was barely there because we were switching from one station to the other. We had what was much more equipment than we had before, but much better equipment than we had before, and we had the extra studio to do recording in, so that was helpful also. Was there a question I missed in there?
Just learning how to edit tape and how to
Um,
produce things.
yeah, I must have taken a class on it. I don't remember specific. I remember sitting at the tape machine, and I remember dropping a piece of tape, which has no marking on it,
Yeah.
into a pile of other tape, and going, "Damn it!" And
Uh,
you got to go through every single piece to find the one you want. Um, it was a skill. I got a couple of awards for my editing, um, and it's something that didn't carry over to me for electronic editing. I think it's not as intuitive. Each program seems to be completely different to me. I have a little trouble with modern recording. I'm getting old.
yeah. That's some of them are real straightforward and simple, and some of them are a little more complex for you and I have my program that works for me, and anything more complicated than that, I don't have the time or the bandwidth to deal with that. So I understand the days of grease pencils and razor blades were difficult in their own way, but you knew what you had, you knew what you were dealing with, and some of the programs now are a little too complex for me.
Well, one of the things I learned from computer science is if you're writing a program, have all the buttons do the same thing. So from program to program, have all the buttons do the same thing. The audio people did not catch on to that at all. Every program has a different button in a different place, and you can't just guess where it is because you're going to be wrong.
Right, right. That's smart. That's smart. So you talked a little bit about Jeff and you talked about Rick. Were there other people around in your early days at Hofstra Radio that were helpful or that you remember listening to?
I am terrible at names, and Sue Zizza was taught one of the classes.
Mm-hmm.
We did a voiceover class with Sue, and she said my timing is terrible. I'll never be able to work professionally in radio. And when I worked in professionally, I had other hosts for the show call me up and tell me how good my timing was. So Sue was wrong about that. but other than that, she's a memorable character.
Absolutely. Was there a point in time where maybe doing a jazz show or doing some editing where you felt that you were really comfortable working in the medium with the equipment that you were like, oh, this is great? Or was there a light bulb moment where you thought, oh, I really got it now?
No, I think I was happy with the education I got. I think I told you professionally, the equipment that I used was not as good. You couldn't record down to one track. Every time something happened, an engineer had to come in and fix it. And we were out on Long Island in North Fork, so it was hard to get to.
Mm-hmm.
As far as WRHU equipment, I was happy with it. I think it's much more. Well, the day I graduated, they opened up the $1 million communication center. So I always say my diploma is worth more than it should be because I wasn't there when the new facility opened up.
Oh, that probably would have been Dempster Hall with the new TV facilities.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so it would be a few more years before the new radio facility was built, but yeah, to be on that cusp, and you said that earlier with the computer science, is that it's that moment when the technology is changing faster than we can teach it or learn it, and then the commercial world is already moving on to the next thing. But in some cases, like you said, radio, the equipment stayed the same at least for a little while.
Yeah, it really is amazing. To think back how much our lives have changed as far as production goes from that time. I remember having to make up my own sound effects because we didn't have a way to get sound effects.
Right.
So you wander around the studio and find things that made noises that you liked. And of course, then I went to record albums with sound effects on them, which you had to pay for. And then whatever recording now is just more than I would have imagined when we started.
Yeah, I see. I have a recollection of Jeff in one of the production studios, and I think the station had just bought a sound effects library either on compact disc or there was some sort of memory disc that could go into one of the production machines, and it was expensive. And he said, learn this and be careful with it. And things have obviously changed quite a great deal since then.
I'll tell you more about this later, but I produced some pageants, about a dozen pageants. And every year I'd go in and I would work with the same guy, the same sound guy, and every year I'd have different equipment for sound. He started out with a cart, then a cassette player, then a mini disc, the USB port, every time I went in, it was a new technology.
Yeah.
Um, and this is from year to year, not even from years to years. It was just from 1 year at a time.
Yeah, the change does happen rather quickly sometimes. It's tough to keep up. I'm wondering if you could go back to your mindset when you first showed up at the radio station and what you hoped it would be. And then over time, after spending a few years at WRHU, what did the station mean to you then?
Well, let's just say it was a time of change. The TV production was downstairs. It was a little crude. Even at the time, I thought it was a little crude. Um, the teacher had been there for many years. I can't remember his name, but he probably was there when you were there too. Um, and he tried to. I was talking in the back of the classroom. He tried to nail me on not paying attention, but I was paying attention out of the corner of my ear. So he said, "Repeat after me." He was trying to catch me, so I'd get in trouble. But I remembered everything he told me. I spit it back at him, and he was pissed off. But at some point, I emphasized radio over television. The equipment is really nice now.
Yes. Yes, they've done an amazing job. But I guess when you first showed up at the radio station, like we said before, you had this experience with CB radio, and you were looking for a way to sort of find your voice. What were you hoping the radio station would be at that point?
I don't think I had any expectations. I think I went with an open mind because I was there to learn. And it was a steep curve. So I kind of went with it, and they were kind of learning too because it was a new studio. There was new classes that hadn't been there before. Production class. It was a 4-hour production class on Friday afternoons. We did an editing class. Jeff nailed me that time when he said, "Why don't you sign up for something?"
Hmm.
And I was like, Jeff's talking to me. What's he saying? What did I do wrong? Uh, so, uh, so that's why I said he assigned me to clean up the studio every day, which I didn't mind doing.
But it seems like over time it became a pretty meaningful place for you.
Yes, I enjoyed doing the shows. Enjoyed recording. I liked editing, which is pretty good. Oh, me and Jim Bazios were working on a Halloween piece called what was it called? It was about a guy who got a call from his dead friend, and his friend was encouraging him to come to join him.
Oof.
And I'll have to send it to you. They played it every year on Halloween for a long time. Dead Call, that's what it was called. Dead Call. I got rid of some of the shyness that I said I had. I don't know. I don't know at that point if I still would have spoken to a crowd or not.
Hmm.
Later on, I would, but it was overall it was a good experience.
And then you were saying it led to some work in commercial radio after Hofstra?
Yes, I did work for WBAZ out on Long Island for about a year. Then I moved to California to get famous. That didn't really work out.
Hmm.
I eventually bought an insurance business, which I'm still doing today. But the advantage to the insurance business was gave me freedom to do other things. So I did voiceovers for. I had an agent for a short time, and something in his personal life. He disappeared on me, but he got me some good auditions for Disney and some other companies you never heard of. Um, LASIX company. Um, and then for 4 or 5 years, I was a spokesperson for trade schools. UEI was the one in Los Angeles, but they were all over the country. Some of them were computer size, some of them were movie theater size. And I was just imagining somebody sitting in the dark, hearing my voice in the movie theater. And I said, well, that's kind of cool, kind of scary at the same time.
Yeah, for someone who was a shy teenager who didn't want to speak out, now suddenly you're the voice of a company. You're the spokesperson. That's quite a journey.
I did that for a few years too. I enjoyed it.
Wow. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and how you get started at Hofstra Radio. And I have another set of questions. And if you've got more stories, maybe we can do this again sometime.
Sure, whenever you're ready, I'm available.